Hey everyone, and welcome to another Risky Biz product demo. My name's Patrick Gray, and today I'm absolutely thrilled to have back in our sort of virtual studio David Cottingham, who's the Chief Executive of Airlock Digital, and Daniel Schell, who is the Chief Technology Officer of Airlock Digital. And for those who don't know what Airlock is an allow listing platform that works across Linux, Mac, and of course Windows, and it lets you set really, really granular controls over what can be executed in your environment. So it covers DLLs, it covers scripts, it covers executables, it covers browser plugins, and not the bad way, using some Google API that lets some supply chain compromised plugin execute after it's being updated. Like, they have done it the right way. They've been in business for a long time. They hail from Australia, which is awesome because so do I. And as you can probably tell from the way that I'm talking about them, I'm a massive fan of this company. They have deployments out there in environments with 100,000 endpoints. So for those people who say that allow listing can't scale, well, I'm happy to say you're just wrong. They can do it, and they are doing it, and it's a beautiful thing. So how did I go with the intro there, Dave? That's about the long and short of it, isn't it?
No, that was fantastic intro. I couldn't took the words right out of my mouth, Patrick. But yeah, look, being practitioners ourselves, we started all of this because we needed a solution to our own problem, which was really the process problem of driving allow listing. I really see our purpose to be able to, allow people to choose what they trust, block everything else, and be able to do that at scale. By enabling the process of making those decisions and getting a really great deny by default security outcome for their endpoints.
And to be clear, there's not really another way to do this. So, a lot of people, they wind up becoming Airlock customers because they try to do it with Microsoft's tools, which can, you can do some stuff with them. It's not going to be as granular, and it's going to be a lot harder to manage. And that's really, goes back to what you were saying, where the point of Airlock, the magic is not so much, you could just do allow and deny. The point is you can manage it at scale without wanting to jump out the nearest window.
Yeah, it's a process problem, and that's what I saw as the biggest challenge before starting the company was, hang on, the process of choosing trust, delivering it to endpoints, and allowing people to get on with their work when they need to get on with it is the thing that's really broken here, not necessarily the underlying ability to allow or block things. So that's what a lot of thoughts gone into how we've designed this, and it speaks to the success of really large enterprises that we've been able to have as fantastic customers.
Yeah. And I remember back when you considered 10 to 15,000 to be a big one. And I know that you've got a couple, at least 100,000 plus endpoint customer, which is a hell of an achievement. So congratulations to both of you. So let's get into the demo now. Daniel, are you going to be leading us through the demo?
Yep, that's the plan. So
that's you. All right. So where to start? Where to begin?
Yeah, sure. So obviously we're a client-server type model because we need to actually control the endpoints. So there's a server component which I'm showing at the moment. Within this server window, we have our server's agents deployed, and you see they register into traditional policy groups and stuff like that. So we support Windows XP onwards on Windows because we have some customers focused on legacy environments as well, or embedded environments, and then we also support Linux, like Ubuntu, Red Hat flavors, as well as Macintosh as well. So pretty big coverage, not just Windows, I guess, is the main point here. And where we start in the solution is generally, we start with some baselines where we get some sort of stuff going. But at the end of the day, what we're really trying to achieve is sort of trusting publishers, is sort of where we generally start with Windows. So, you create a policy structure to reflect your network to some degree, come in here, say, let's just trust Microsoft, trust Red Hat as publishers. We're very powerful in that side of what sort of sets us apart a lot is our ability to support publishers in all different environments and also support it at many different levels within the ecosystem.
So just to be clear though, what we're looking at here is the agents have been installed on the endpoints, obviously with a configuration to talk to this server, and they're all checked in, they're there, ready to go, ready to have policies applied to them.
Yep, that's it. And where that starts normally for our customers is they'll start in what we call an audit mode. And that's sort of a view-only mode of the solution. Now, I'm in enforcement, so I'm going to quickly grab this guy, chuck it into audit, and you'll see how easy that is. So that machine's there now. Browse this machine, push OK. And this is sort of the learning mode in the product at this stage. So you see my machine's now here in audit mode. And if I run something that's maybe not trusted, in this case, possibly, we'll actually find something. So here we go, paint.net. What we can see here is that the application is actually allowed to run, but you can see that all this information is being collected by the agent. So this would be DLLs, scripts, all the parts of the application are running.
All of Microsoft's grotesque plumbing that is required to execute in order to load Paint.
Yeah. So
Basically.
that comes in. And this information then, when you're in this audit mode, is coming back to the dashboard here. So, really, saying that makes allow listing possible, in our opinion, is that centralized visibility and collection. A lot of solutions out there, they're controlling the endpoint, but you might not be able to see, or you're collecting event logs and you're trying to put it all together with custom sort of middleware. This is all built in. So at the end of the day, I can come in here and say, what's been going on, or what am I learning here? It's all summarized here. And, you can do some filtering by policy groups or similar, but what we're really trying to do here is go into our bulk add process. And what this process is doing is sort of giving us a summary. And I've got quite a few machines I've sort of been deploying today and applications. So I see here's VOC, here's paint.net binaries and such like that. And I can say, okay, well, what do I want to do here? And, we might say, well, if I'm only interested in paint.net, I could come in here, click on .pdn, that's the paint.net sort of publisher here. And I can see here all their files are sort of signed. So if I just wanted to trust this, I could just go here, add to policy, trust the publisher for workstations, bang, done. And that's added now. It's also possible to sort of, be more granular and maybe select individual files. This would be like a hash-based trust. And then again, that would also be easy to do, where we sort of put in a bucket of hashes. So I'd say, well, I'm going to trust those files by hash, chuck them in that bucket, off they go. And
so it's worth mentioning too that yours, you're mostly doing stuff around publisher trust. Mm-hmm. So you can say, we trust this publisher to update these things, but maybe not those things. As I said, you can get quite granular. And if you're dealing with like unsigned binaries or whatever, you can just go to like, okay, trust this file hash kind of thing.
Yeah, you can always go back to that. Or trust this path, trust this parent process. A lot of granularity is built into the
different aspects. And this process is really like reconciling a bank account. We tend to talk about it.
Yeah, it's like it's a little bit like being in Xero or whatever and doing the books, right? Like it's that sort of workflow.
And this top layer of the bar here as well, we have a partnership with Google Virus Total. So you can also see there's this overlay of like, hey, are these known files? In this data set, there's nothing malicious. And we also augment this further, say, well, what's the suspicious ones here? And you can see there's I've got TeamViewer quick support here as well. So I ran that earlier, by our reputation, we sort of make this decision ourselves. So at the top of the VT data, we say, hey, if it's TeamViewer, maybe our customers would like that highlighted to them before just accidentally going too far. So we try to put some sort of rails around this as well. And for every file...
it's worth pointing out too that when you change a policy in the server, you don't have to manually update the clients. Because the only reason I mentioned that is because you just jumped to the other window earlier and hit update policy. That will get you an instant update, but if you just wait a few minutes, it does trickle through, and that's configurable too.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, and for any file you ever see with Airlock as well, like if I go into this TeamViewer Quick Support, we have like what we call a repository page. So here you can really see the details of this file. So, okay, I've seen this file, one of my 3 endpoints here. I can sort of enumerate my policy here, where I can see what actually would be blocked because it's just not allowed. Here we've got the virus total overlay of this is a suspicious file or the reasons behind it. We can pivot out into the VT data to look into that further if we want as well. And see the history and where it would be allowed to run or not run. So it also makes really troubleshooting easy. So if you're like, hey, what's going on with this file? I can straight away find out everything about it and the context and history of that file.
And even though you're choosing not to show them, like if you've got a customer doing a POC and it turns up malware, it will actually identify that malware and say, these are known bad files. Obviously, it's not an anti-malware solution, so it might not find, absolutely everything, but it will tell you if there's known malware in your environment. Known malware files, I guess I should say. And I think that's the hair I'm trying to split there, which is it's not going to look at the way something's behaving and saying, yeah, that's malware. But if it's actually a known binary, a known actual file, that's bad, it will flag on that.
And there's so much adjacent value from doing this in your environment.
Well, having a software inventory is pretty handy.
Exactly. And also a file inventory. So if you get threat intelligence report and you want to go look up a hash and say, have I ever seen this? We'll be able to give you that database. And I think that's the one of the big differentiators of our approach when we're talking about allow listing. This is entirely driven by only your data. It's entirely made up of your decisions. And a lot of other people will say, that's too hard. But that's the problem that we solve, right? And so what you get is if an attacker tries to come at you with a custom piece of software, they can't come to us as a vendor and sort of poison the data set, because it's your choices, because you have the context in your business, and that's what drives a really great security outcome. And great software inventory and intelligence for your security teams. So,
and of course, if you get something come out that looks a little sus, it's quite easy to throw that file into a sandbox or whatever before you make the decision to allow it to deploy everywhere.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. And look, why I was just demoing while you were talking there was I ran the file again. There were the paint.net, there were no more exceptions, and I've switched the machine back into enforcement mode. Again, it's fine. It's trusted now. So that sort of process of going through, now there's less files at the end of the day to go through this process. And generally, most of our customers, what they'll do is someone will come in the morning, they'll come in here, review what's happened in the last little while, add it in, do the bulk ads, decide to trust the publishers, and then most of our customers say it's like an hour a day, or most small customers like a minute a day. So where they come in, have their coffee, go to bang, 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 done. Okay, I'm across what's happening. Or
reconcile the account.
Yeah, reconcile the accounts. Yeah,
exactly.
And security accountants.
That's right, security accounting. And I think I've described it to people as like, well, yeah, you need to touch it every day, but like it's a stitch in time saves 9 kind of deal. Whereas if you just do this once a day, you're not going to spend time re-imaging boxes and actually chasing down things like false positives.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And and that's that audit period. So that first part of our deployment is sort of, you roll out the agents across the environment, all that data starts coming in, you start reconciling, and as these numbers get less, you then can start moving those machines into enforcement mode. And at that point, you're in a proactive state where the files are going to be blocked at that point, are really going to be like not the DLLs and the scripts and stuff underneath the files, but generally the installers or maybe the main binaries of applications that haven't been trusted. And then you have a small list to deal with.
We should also point out too that this really reduces the amount of seam chatter that you have to deal with in a SOC, right? So that's another thing I was mentioning before about effort. Doing this for an hour a day means less time wading through seam alerts to work out if something's a real incident or not, because you just don't have as many executions of weird, random stuff, whether that is an employee trying to pull down the latest Farmville or whatever it is. You just don't have to deal with that anymore, which, certainly is actually a time saver, right? You're just choosing where to put your effort, and this is a good place to put it.
Yeah, and it's the same for EDR as well, right? Like, if things are going to be blocked, there's going to be less suspicious behaviors because they never happened.
Well, that's kind of what I meant by the seam thing, right? Like a lot of people are pumping their EDR stuff into their seam. And funnily enough, I mean, I've spoken to customers of yours, and no one ditches their EDR once they become an Airlock customer. But what they find is that it just never chirps at them. And when it does, it's a pen tester trying to do a local privilege escalation through some MS Teams DLL that can't be, blocklisted basically by your package, and that's about it. So, which is quite funny when you think about it, where the mighty EDRs are reduced to watching a handful of DLLs for odd behavior.
And it's such a good complement in terms of technologies as well. We're doing the deny by default proactive code, and then you've got the behavior detection on top of that, which is, there's such a different level of visibility on that too.
Well, that's right. When you're not dealing with a flood of logs, it means that if there is an actual incident, it's really going to stick out, and you're going to catch it.
Yeah.
And when you get to that enforcement stage, when you're obviously in this mode where untrusted code's not going to run, you've obviously achieved sort of the outcome, that your security posture is so much higher just because you're controlling everything. And this is the part where, in the past, other allow listing solutions have sort of fallen short, because what will happen at this stage now is someone will say, I need to run this thing right now. I need to hop on this go-to meeting, and go-to meetings not trusted. Like, how do I, you have to let the solution also get out the way. And we have so many workflows in the procs around that. So we have, for example, what we call a one-time pad flow, where you could, for example, you could contact the help desk. And the help desk can come find you, go, okay, this is your computer, listen to your reason, and you'll say, hey, well, it needs to run. I think Chrome's not allowed in this one, so we'll do Chrome as just a reason. And then we say, like, but not just forever, and not just on this endpoint. We'll say, well, he's got to join this WebEx, or saying, let's allow him to do it for 6 hours. That's probably as long as it's going to get. You can customize all these times as well. Generate this code. And then what we can do is come back over here. You can read it out to the user. We also have sort of APIs, so a lot of people put this into like your automations as well, where they'll do it for a help desk call, and then that will automatically unlock the machine, those sorts of things as well. And you put this code in, you see it sort of activates, and then the timer starts. Now, this user's immediately, going to be able to get on with the work that they were doing. So I need to find something. Did I say Chrome is even installed?
You said Chrome.
You said Chrome, and then you don't have Chrome on the box, which I think is really funny, but I'm sure the people watching this still get it.
That's great. Let's see what the problem is. If something trusted.
This is too funny. This is too funny a demo mistake not to leave in, you know?
Yeah, exactly right.
That's very true. So we can use WinScoop instead. That's worked out here for me, even though it's a very simple app with one file. But any of the files or supporting files would then be logged. But you can see the user in this case would be blocked from running this, but because it's tagged as being a one-time pad exception, that they're now able to run that and get on with their work. But also, it's not a permanent exception. These files are then being uploaded back to the server. And they'll be reconciled on the next time you go through that
and it's also
process.
it's a one-time exception for that box, right? So if this is something really nasty, it's going to have a hard time spreading.
Yeah, and we can see here that it's online. It's about to upload the data here. But you can see, for example, if I look at one from before with VLC, you can also drill into these and say, well, what's going on here? Like, okay, here's all the VLC files. From here, I can trust the publisher. So again, there's all about these workflows that let you go, what's the deal? Let's get on with it. Done. Move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose the nice thing too is that, if there's been an incident with a software publisher, it's entirely possible for you to just untrust that publisher, and within minutes across your entire enterprise, and as I mentioned, that could be, 100,000 plus endpoints, software signed by that publisher won't run.
Yeah. Okay.
So if there is an incident at one of the publishers you rely on, you could just stand down that software for a day. I mean, trying to do that other ways, you could probably do it with some of the EDR solutions, but this is what this is designed to do, and it's going to be very effective.
Well, when the SolarWinds incident happened, what customers reached out and said, what do we do? And we said, well, at the end of the day, we don't know if the code signing certificates for SolarWinds have been, leaked because of this. So what they actually did was they converted all of the files they'd seen signed by SolarWinds in the past to a hash-based trust, and then stopped showing the publisher. So any newly signed files that might have been signed by SolarWinds certs would no longer be trusted. They sort of just locked down the trust to where it was. And then also, using our database of every file they've ever seen, start comparing against the IOC lists of the known bad files from the campaign. So a powerful framework for controlling that.
Yeah, and you can also do things once you get into some of the more advanced features, like you can actually revoke one specific code signing certificate that may be bad from a particular company, but continue using the rest. So, if we know which cert's been stolen based on its TBS hash of the certificate, we can actually block that individually and allow you to continue using the rest of the software.
We also have, for example, a self-service capability. So you can also allow certain users or groups of users based on like their AD membership, and that's often really helpful for maybe developers or such. Like traditionally, you'd have no way an allow listing project's going to get off the ground in a development area. But for us, when you sort of add these capabilities that they can just put into their build scripts, like they can use a command line to self-service on demand while they compile or XYZ, you can always enable them. And once you show the developers this, they'll go, all right, no worries, as long as I can get it out of the way when I need to. Yeah. And again, all that telemetry is still coming out.
Well, and it is the big argument, isn't it, against these sort of things. You always hear, but it doesn't work because developers.
Yes.
And you always think, well, you could put it on every other box, but this way you can even put it on their machines.
Yeah, and there's things that we could do as well, like, you can trust, Visual Studio to sit there and compile code and then allow that to execute from there. So you're reducing that friction. So it's like, okay, well, you sort of produce the code out of this, and then sort of reduce that friction that way too. But we really try so much with the software to think about what's your primary use case here. That's why what we've shown so far is really just those immediate decisions and those common workflows that most people need to drive, because that's what you're doing the majority of the time. And then, of course, we sort of extend it and go, okay, you've got developers, go start implementing these things. I think a lot of our value is also guidance to customers about what different operating scenarios you have and how best to achieve them.
Yeah.
And I think I'd have to show you at this point, Patrick, since you were sort of demanding the feature yourself, some browser extension control.
This has been a long-running, multi-year thing with us, which is I spotted some research probably a couple of years back of North Korean APTs once they were getting on machines, jumping through a whole bunch of hoops to try to install browser extensions that were capable of cookie theft. And I remember coming to David and Daniel and saying, allow listing around that is going to be very, very useful. And they're like, yes, it's on the roadmap, Pat. Don't worry. It's on the roadmap. And when was it released? Like last year?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah. So last year, there it is. You've now introduced the ability to allow list extensions into browsers. And what makes this special is, say, Google has like, you can do it through like Google Admin to restrict access to extensions. But that's like a publisher restriction, which once you approve it, it's approved, which means if that publisher of an extension gets compromised, and we saw this last year, and they start issuing bad updates, you're not in a very good position. Whereas here with Airlock, at least you would have to approve any update, even if it was validly signed, if you've configured it to do that. So, it's allow listing around extensions the right way. But show us, Daniel. Show us.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
So I just had the showing you the block, but we can see now in the dashboard we've got another section called extensions. We can see the extensions which have been tried to be installed, and sometimes you want to actually trust them. So I've got Nord here and Bow tabs, so probably not ones that you'd ever want to add, but it goes through the same process. Going into the bulk add. Often they don't have sort of the VT type reputation on here, so we're going to start providing our version of like known bad, and we'll be following the blogs and intelligence to sort of help provide more context here. Sometimes they do pop up as known good and bad, but these are the extensions. Now this is also Edge, Chrome, and Firefox as well, so a lot of coverage here as well. And then if I want to trust one of these, I could grow. If I want to trust Bow tabs for some reason, I can add that into a policy group, into a bucket. And then that would be trust across the fleet and different extensions for different regions.
Are people jumping on this one? Because I have a feeling that like just with what happened late last year, and we're recording this in early 2025, but certainly some very bad things happened with Chrome extensions towards the end of last year. Is that stimulating some renewed interest in this?
Yeah, it definitely has. Like we've had a lot of people who've sort of started, and also customers that sort of upgraded and not really looked at the feature yet, and then they sort of went, "Oh, maybe we need to do something about this," and then they suddenly saw with horror when they started looking at the the extensions that were getting installed across the environment.
So I guess you've got like an audit mode.
Hundreds of extensions, right?
So you've got an audit mode for that as well, right? It's where you can
that's
go
correct. And you can even be in that enforcement mode for files and scripts, but be in a learning mode for browser extensions. So when
does EDR give you much on browser extensions?
Not so much on the extensions themselves, but more so on the behaviors. Like if it causes a weird behavior that comes out of the browser, then maybe. But
the problem is malicious extensions now. They're not trying to get outside the browser. They're just trying to steal your session cookies and forward them to an attacker. So
and there wouldn't be much visibility within the browser, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think just the most exciting thing for customers when they've been deploying this is just to have an inventory of what extensions are out there, because most customers don't know before they embark on something like this. They're just it's within the user control, unless they have just disabled it and they're in sort of a enterprise position where they've got really good control of the browser already and they're just having a ban on it. But as you know, in the enterprise, there's edge cases, I'll wind that back, and it just sort of gets away from you, whereas this sort of allows you to really quickly pick and choose individually. And also it prevents sort of the name squatting for extensions as well. You can identify the one that you want, by its extension ID and a number of other attributes as well. Then that one's allowed. And if anyone comes along and tries to get one that looks the same but isn't, then obviously you'll have control of that too. So it's quite powerful.
Excellent.
So once our customers are also once they're sort of in that enforcement mode, they've got the browser extensions being blocked, all the files and scripts are under control, people are self-servicing. Where the companies sort of start looking after that is they start looking into sort of like block listing capabilities, which we call that sort of like hardening or further hardening. And this is where we do things such as lolbins and such like that, where we deal with that. So we, for example, have like predefined block lists in the products for different micro attack techniques and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, this is a framework that gives you really strong control, where we might say, for example, block custom remote access tools. And I just made a simple rule in here that says, and it sort of looks like this, where you go, if the publisher contains TeamViewer, block, right? And then you can apply that to a group. And the reason for a rule you might say, well, why do I want a rule like this if I'm doing allow listing? And then you will say, well, that's because they might be on that one-time pad exception. We still don't want them running TeamViewer. So we'll override those exceptions. Or if someone had accidentally trusted TeamViewer as a publisher or something like that, then it would still be blocked. And often I talk about this stuff as far as sometimes enforcing your sort of policies in the organization. So there's often like user what's the word for it?
Software, policies about what you can and can't.
Yeah, use. Like the users should not be running coin miners. Users should not be doing these things. And sometimes people will say, well, how do you prove that you've got this enforcement? And you could say, well, our listing count does that, but you could also say at the end of the day, hey, like I was here, if TeamViewer is installed and I want to run that, it's just not going to be allowed. And you see this one's blocked as well, but not because I'm in enforcement mode. It's blocked because it's on the blocked list.
Yeah.
So it's explicit denied no matter what.
You've got controls over things like early versions of PowerShell that are basically impossible to allow it's impossible to allow them to run safely.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got restrictions on some of Microsoft's, own DLLs, which allow people to do things like local privilege escalation, maybe even shut down kernel extensions like yours, so you've got the ability to prevent, that's been a long time problem with allow listing solutions, is that people can step around them. And EDR as well. You look at EDR bypasses, it's always these lolbins that are, native Windows components that can be abused to take control of a system. And you've got policies in there that are very granular. So, certain files can be used in certain ways to do certain things, but not other things that are associated with risky behaviors. So that's a host integrity and product integrity measure that you've taken that, we know people who've done pen tests where they start with a local admin shell on a box protected by Airlock, and they spend quite a long time bashing their head against the wall before they're able to get absolutely anywhere. And that's when they're starting with local admin.
Yeah. And that's the sort of things we'll see on like customers will share their pen test reports with us, and they'll be like, great, it took them 4 days to get some sort of foothold, and then they did like a PowerShell 2V downgrade or something, and that's how they did it. And it's like, okay, cool, well, how can we make a rule, or how can we restrain that capability they have?
We spend a large amount of time engineering to try and detect, as many bypasses or sneaky ways of loading code by default, so you don't even need to configure them. Obviously, we want a really strong security baseline. That's preference. But when you're starting to constrain Windows tools that can be legitimately used, then it goes into these frameworks where we just try and make it easy as possible for you to bring in that constraint.
It's probably worth pointing out too that if you put an attacker on a box that's protected in this way, and then they're trying to sidestep your product, and you've got these sort of restrictions in place, they're going to make a lot of noise.
Yes,
they're going to make so much noise because you're going to be seeing so many blocked executions and stuff before they find that thing that might eventually work, right? Because nothing's completely impenetrable once you've got a admin account on the box. But hey, you know what I mean? Like you're gonna detect them if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, you're a blindfolded bull in a china shop.
Yeah, that's right.
And security is all about constraint, right? If you can define really good operating parameters and standards, the attackers have to play within your constraints. And to me, that's just where this all comes back to. So,
And I think where security vendors, or where the friction is for this sort of hardening has been in the past is, you see, for example, here I've got PowerShell v2, okay, that's going to be blocked, or SSH and SFTP, these are like tools that attackers use to move around the network. Microsoft's being nice enough to include them into base Windows 11 now, so again, we sort of can restrict these things. But occasionally with more sort of, when everything's a big hammer, what will happen is that someone will go, well, actually, or in the enterprise, when you're on 100,000 points, you'll end up finding there's 20 machines that they do this all the time, and it's part of legitimate workflows. Yeah. And, that's where we can really tune on these things, where we can say, here's the rule, where we say, okay, well, here's the deal, we'll block it if it's OpenSSH for Windows, and the publisher contains Microsoft. We might put another rule on here and say, and the domain security group of the user is a member of domain admins, or, So you can really be very granular, again, of being like, okay, we know it's going to happen in these situations, or these apps that sometimes you'd be amazed how apps act in the background sometimes, where we say, well, that's just a suspicious behavior. Yes, in those cases, but not for this app. So we're going to make a rule for that.
Well, and the other thing that occurred to me too, just when you were talking about blocking SSH, and you could do things like TFTP. I don't even know if that's still in Windows, but probably is. But, in terms of being able to block all of these things, it means that if there is a box on your network that isn't the standard SOE that you've put together that's supposed to not ship with that stuff, you're still covered because Airlock will block it, right? So, I just recall that one time and you'll remember this, one time I organized a POC for you in with another vendor, actually, who I deal with. And the thing that blew their minds initially wasn't that you found malware, but it's that you found all of that Dell crapware, all of that vulnerable Dell crapware on boxes that were supposed to have been re-imaged with their standard operating environment, right? So Yeah, it's just something else to keep in mind is you do get that extra, that extra assurance that people can't run crazy stuff that's not supposed to be there in the first place.
And this is why it's critical that these decisions are based on your data. Every other vendor, to my knowledge, says this is too hard. They don't focus on the process, so instead they just create giant cloud definitions of what to trust. And of course, Dell is going to be on the trusted list.
What's more trustworthy than Dell, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then it's just allowed, and you don't have visibility of it. And, this is just the beauty of that approach. You get visibility of that. You can say, hang on, I actually don't want all of that part of the Dell software. Thank you. And then just let it be blocked. And then, you've got the visibility and the opportunity to remove it if you so choose.
Yeah.
One thing that's really cool as well, we've got coming up next month, is for all of these individual rules that you create, you can actually create custom messages depending on the rule. So what you can do is, like, let's say someone tries to run TeamViewer, you could say, this is not allowed. We don't want you doing this, rather than saying, hey, this file is blocked, contact the service desk. So you can start actually communicating to the user depending on what behaviors they take. And that to me is really exciting.
Like human parsable messages saying TeamViewer is really frequently used by hackers to target networks like ours. So it's not, you can't run it here. If you have some questions or you need something, contact the help desk.
Yeah, exactly right.
And you see, like, what I have up here is also that virus total snap-in. So for any file, again, you've ever seen in your environment, you bring in, like, hey, does it hit any crowdsourced Yarrow rules? What do all the AV vendors think about this? Even break into what the IOC is extracted from, when Virus Total has done the sandboxing and static analysis, and even like your graphs on like what IP addresses did this attach to and such, and you sort of like start exploring this information as well. So it's really cool to see that sort of some of this VT enterprise type data being sort of injected into the product as well.
Yeah. Now we're going to wrap it up shortly, but before we do, I believe you wanted to flex your Linux UI for the product, which is cool because not many people do that.
So this is actually the window, the actual Airlock server itself. So in this case, I'm showing you the server that I'm actually running it on, but it actually has allow listing applied to it. Because why wouldn't you? And then so you can see I'm trying to run a script there. The script's not on the allow list, so it's not allowed to run. But then we have here the sort of the agent component of that, where we've got this nice UI, which is kind of cool as well, because sometimes people aren't that familiar with Linux, or they need a bit of help. So we got a lot of little capabilities here where they sort of filter and sort the data. And we see here nicely, okay, this was blocked, these other ones were blocked and not allowed. Parent process, all this information sort of here. And it's also then easy to sort of, just update the policy and stuff like that. You can do that all really easy through shortcuts.
This is a disturbingly pleasant interface for Linux. It's not supposed to look nice, guys. What is going on?
I think that's why we had to show it off, because even
it's really cool.
And I mean, it's essential to troubleshooting. If you're in a server room, sitting there on the terminal, and you're trying to figure out why something's happening, you can just load this up, and it gives you, current state, and again, pretty much feature parity with Windows here. So. And all the workflows to manage this are exactly the same in the background as well. So
so you just back over in that console, doing the same thing. Yeah,
exactly.
All right. Well, look, it's great to see you as always, guys, and thanks for giving us an update on the the latest iteration of Airlock, which has been around for what, like 8 years, 10 years, something like that now.
Yeah, we started building 11 years ago now. So
wow.
And look, it was a pet project for a long time before we went, all right, let's move. But it's been a long journey, but I also feel as though we're just getting started. We've got so much to come. New UI coming very soon. We've got multi-tenancy now. There's just so much we're going to deliver over the next 12 months.
That's the new UI that Daniel's just switched to there, which is very pretty, and it's got multi-tenant. Capabilities and whatever. So that's great. All right. Well, great to see you, David. Great to see you, Daniel. Thanks so much for the demo. And I guess if anyone's got questions, drop them into the comments below. They are held initially, but we do approve them. And, we can get back to you with some answers. But guys, thanks again. Cheers.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick.